Welcome to the Nick Blevins Family Ministry Podcast. Our goal is to help you maximize your church's potential. You'll hear from top leaders in children's, student, and family ministry about the principles and practices they use. Now here's your host, Nick Blevins.
Hello and welcome to episode 94 of the podcast. This was a fun one. I got to interview my friend Kevin Monahan from 12 Stone Church. If you've been listening for a long time, you might remember that we had Kevin on back in the early days, episode 9, in fact, of the podcast, and we talked about leadership in a multi-site environment or even just leadership in general, structure, how they lead through volunteers there at 12 Stone. But this time we talk about kind of a program that 12 Stone has that I just think is tremendous, and it's their internship and their residency program. I get lots of questions about internships and residencies, and one thing I've observed is with most larger churches, 2,000, 3,000 plus, a lot of them lean heavily on residents and interns to run the ministry. They're just larger ministries. They could use more staff, but it's not always the case, despite what you might think, that the larger you are, you have more money for the ministry. And so they fill gaps with interns and residents. But more than that, they have a good focus on helping people figure out, should I work in full-time vocational ministry? They're not just, helping additional staff and used up like you think of internships maybe in the negative sense. They really do help them, and 12 Stone certainly does that with their program. So we kind of talked all the way through what their program is, how it works, and theirs is unique because your church can actually partner with them and use their plan and their content, and you can have residents at your church. Plus, you can hire residents that they've had, which I just think is amazing because I would probably rather have a resident from 12 Stone Church with Kevin or somebody's recommendation far more than I would someone that I haven't known, or even maybe somebody that's had 5 years experience somewhere else. And maybe it's just a relationship. I'm biased. Kevin's a friend. 12 Stone's a great church. I love them. But that's unique. They really help their residents either get jobs with them or get jobs elsewhere. More of them obviously get jobs elsewhere. So it's a great program, and Kevin talks about how it works and how they do it, how churches can partner with them and all that. So that's all I have. We're going to have the notes and everything as usual at nickblevins.com/episode 94, but let's jump right in to my conversation with Kevin. Well, it's good to have my friend Kevin Monahan back on the podcast. Welcome, Kevin.
Hey, Nick. How you doing, buddy?
Doing all right, man. It's good to have you back, and if anybody didn't listen to episode 9 with you in the early days of the podcast, which feels like so long ago, which I guess was not even 2 years ago or something, but it feels like so long ago. But in case they didn't listen to that, aren't familiar with you, introduce yourself to us.
Yeah, man. Well, thanks for having me. My name's Kevin Monahan, and I get the honor and privilege of leading NextGen Ministry at 12 Stone Church in the greater Atlanta area of Georgia. I've
told people, and I think I've told you this before, that I feel like 12 Stone's like that one of the best kept secrets in church world. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Although I'd say that's not holding up true as much anymore because more and more I feel like people know of your church. But and is it Crossroads in Cincinnati or something like that? That's another one that's like you don't hear a lot about, but man, they put out some great stuff just like you guys do.
Oh man, thanks. Appreciate that.
To help the global church, which is really cool. So we're going to talk residencies and internships, which you all do a great job with. I talk to leaders all the time in churches that want an internship program or some type of residency program or something like that. So we're gonna learn how you do yours because it works so well.
Great.
So tell us just an overview. What are both of them? What's the residency program? What's the internship program?
Yeah, so 12 Stone has both. So I'll start with the summer internship. The summer internship is for college-age students. And honestly, the focus for that is for students to do two things. First of all, to either elevate or eliminate their call of ministry. So it's for that student that feels like, man, I don't know if I'm called to ministry. Is this what I want to do? Do I just love my local church, or do I just love Jesus, or has God called me to go be a plumber? And great, man, like go figure that out. And we want to help you figure that out. The other aspect is to give them some multi-site experience, because that is something that 12 Stone is. It's who we are, but it helps them kind of see how we can take the heart of taking Jesus to people, but it looks different in different areas of the various counties that we're in. And so and that's an 8-week summer completely volunteer program that, I mean, quite honestly, I do costs less than $1,000 to run the whole thing, and it's 8 weeks and it's meetings. We'll get into some of that. But that's kind of like an entry level to sit there and say, man, am I really called to ministry, and take a next step, get exposure to multi-site and kind of be developed by some high capacity leaders, which leads us into our residency. And the 12 Stone Church residency is a 2-year, and it's full-time training. And the purpose of that is to kind of give them hands-on experience working with staff teams in the church, things like personal mentoring and leadership training. And I mean, basically equip this emerging church of leaders for a lifetime of ministry significance. And so in that's for people who feel like they're called to ministry. They've kind of settled that, and they just want to get developed and cared for. And by one-on-one, they get a personal coach and to develop them. But it's a little bit more intense. I mean, we take the name similar to as, the medical professionals and stuff have residency after they kind of finish med school and come here and kind of learn kind of the roots and the brass tacks of, doing ministry outside of the classroom, surrounded by some really top-notch leaders that help them get to their next step. So, yeah.
So the internship, I want to hear about like how it works. Sure. We can dive in there a little bit first. But before that, do you get most of your interns from within the church? Is that how that usually works? Or do you have people come from other areas? Well,
so this is what we started. I'll give you a little bit of a background on it. Is when I first got here 6 years ago, we did really well at high school and kids being called to ministry. I had a great high school pastor who's now leading, student ministry at Liberty University. Derek Ido, great leader, and he just would spend a lot of time with them. But when they finished that, we were like, all right, come back in 6 years for the residency. And so there was a little bit of a void. And as you know, 12 Stone's a very lean model. And so we didn't want to like start anything big and do that. So it just came out of this void of, what do you do when you're in high school and you're struggling? I don't know about you, Nick, but like when I was in high school, like I started off as a music, and I was pre-med, and I was like philosophy and I mean, like I was probably in every school trying to just figure out who I am and what God had called me to do. Did I just love the church and want to be a great volunteer? Or did I actually feel called to staff? So that's kind of where it started, the summer internship as a void to do that. So.
Okay. And how does it work? 8 weeks and like,
yeah, so 8 weeks. So it's mostly done by social media or networking. And we just, in fact, man, we've got about 3 or 4 spots even open for this summer. We don't provide housing or, it's 100% volunteer. So there's no payment. There's nothing like that. And, so it's 8 weeks. They do 4 weeks on. They get a week off for, 4th of July. That way we can let some of these residents know if they need to go with vacation with family or anything. It's kind of a set week, and then they come back for another 4 weeks. So they do some interviewing. We usually start in like January, first of the year, pushing it. I mean, word of mouth has been really great. We work with our residency director too, who may have students that are interested in a residency, but they're still maybe a sophomore or junior in high school. The summer internship, you have to at least complete 1 year of college. We just didn't want to take somebody who just finished high school and put them right into it. We wanted them to kind of experience that distance between high school a little bit. And, and so then they go through the interview process, and everything's kind of done online. And then we've had Skype interviews and all of that, and one-on-one interviews. The majority of the people are from this area, unless they know somebody. We've had people that like, hey, their aunt or their grandma or something like lives here, or they have a friend. I've had an intern like live in my basement, for those 8 weeks as well. But yeah, and that's kind of the process. They get interviewed. We see what God's doing in their heart and what they want to get. The internship's far more about the intern than it is the organization. We know we're not going to get a ton out of somebody in 8 weeks, but hopefully we can invest a ton in them for 8 weeks. So yeah, they go and they interview. And, I mean, that's kind of how it starts.
Do they intern everywhere in the church, or is that pretty specific to NextGen?
Yeah, that's a great question. The majority of them are students in children's, NextGen, family ministry stuff. But I got one that's doing it for this year, one that's doing it in missions and outreach. I've had marketing, I've had communications, adult ministry or spiritual formations. If there's a person on campus, a current staff person that's willing to have an intern and kind of work in our processes for those 8 weeks, it's pretty doable. There's some things it's a little bit harder. Worship's a little bit more difficult to do some of that. But we still have, I think we'll have 2 worship ones this summer so far. But yeah, man, it's in different areas. It's also to help equip current staff, because some of my current staff have never had interns, or may not have residents yet. Maybe they're just where they are in their position. This gives current staff an opportunity to have somebody for 8 weeks, and maybe this is their first time leading, pastoral staff, and then learning some of their skills in that and improving those too. So yeah, it's all over the place, man. It's awesome because I've had some people like, hey, can I do family ministry? Even as NextGen Pastor last year, I had, for the first time in 6 years, I had one that was just an intern for myself, which was a little weird, but it was like she did great and just went around all the different campuses and spent time. So we just had to, kind of uniquely develop that.
That's awesome. How about the residency, which is church-wide, by the way, so people are listening just in case it's not just NextGen, but it's dominated because I think most of them end up in NextGen, right? But how's the residency work?
So the residency is a little bit different. They want, there's an online program. The best way, honestly, to start is to go to churchresidency.com. That's churchresidency.com. It has all kinds of information on there. It's a little bit different. This is 2 years. It's full time. They do get some financial support in that. We also provide housing for them, so that their kind of like basic necessities are taken care of. So that is a much more of a detailed process. I mean, it can be anywhere from 3 to 9 months of interviewing. But even if they're in college, many of my summer interns, the last week or 2 of their summer internship, some of them even desire to be part of the residency, so they may interview then. But we get people all the time flying in here. It's not uncommon for me to get an email and say, hey, Monahan, I've got a guy or a young lady coming from Canada or North Carolina or California or Utah coming in. Can you meet with them and interview them for the residency? And so theirs is a little bit more detailed. We want to make sure that, man, they feel really called to ministry, that they're serving somewhere already consistently, and that they understand kind of the whole parameters of the residency and what they're going to be doing and all of that. And so it's a 2-year program. Their last 6 months, man, we kind of really help them find a job that we feel like, man, kind of the handoff to whatever their next is. I think for our staff, man, we've got like 35 around that. Don't quote me on that number, but around 35 current staff that have been through this residency program for the last 15 years. So
that's awesome. How many do you think you hire each year? I know it's different year to year.
Gosh, that's a great question, but it's not surprising that there's 2 or 3. I think there's 2 key components. It's kind of the timing and the talent. Some of that is, man, like, do we need their talent at that time? So there have been seasons that like we had some residents and we like, yeah, we just don't have anything. I mean, we've got somebody that we don't have any middle school pastors, or I don't have any elementary positions open, and then we end up sending them off. I mean, as you know, what was it, 3 years ago, we launched 5 campuses in the same day. One of our things is like when we started that, like 9 months ahead of time, we were like kind of pulling our hair out a little bit, like, wait, we just sent all these people not knowing that we were going to do this. But man, that's kind of how God works. And it's awesome to see a lot of these residents all over the country. Great churches. Life Church has some, Saddleback, Christ Fellowship. We've sent, a lot of residents to some really great churches around the country to see them kind of prosper. So it's awesome.
Yeah, that is awesome. How about, because I feel like it fills the void. I mean, your program is so developed too. It fills the void that a lot of seminary studies aren't going to give you, where you get that on the ground experience and the connections to then get your next job. Like I know as a church leader, I would much rather hire somebody who did a residency at 12 Stone than somebody fresh out of college. You know what I mean?
Sure. Yeah.
I'd probably hire somebody who did a residency at 12 Stone and had a good recommendation from you and no degree in Bible or something like that over the person who came from seminary. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Because it's just so helpful.
Yeah. And I mean, but here's the same thing is because, I mean, it's great times we live in because of being able to take like online degrees there. I would probably say half of our residents are either getting a master's in Christian education or an MDiv, you know, through some really great schools. We partner with Indiana Wesleyan University and Liberty. I mean, multiple residents are getting that academic if they feel called that way. There's no real pressure, but like, you know, some people are called to the academic side of ministry. And so we want to help facilitate that in them, you know? And so we see it as a partnership with both academic institutions as well as some of our worship residents, some of the other organizations of them getting better lessons and learning to be better skilled at their craft and all of that stuff. So yeah, man, it is awesome. And it is really cool to see. I mean, honestly, I wish they had something like this when I was, you know, I remember just doing an internship and it was basically kind of like cleaning up stuff, doing stuff for people. But and a lot of them, by the time they're done in their 2 years, they're owning ministry. They're facilitating like their pastors, but they get that in kind of a place where if it's a little safer to fail, I don't know if that's the best phrase, but like if they do, they've got some, you know, staff around them that give them tons of grace, but also are like, hey, have you thought about this? Let me help you and collaborate. And it doesn't end when they leave. I mean, it's no joke, probably at least 3 or 4 times a month, I get a call from some resident or some intern that's somewhere around the world asking questions of like, hey, I've got this situation. And I love that, man, because it means that it means what we're doing is bigger than just what we see, you know, locally here. Definitely.
How about the program itself? What is it? What do they learn? What's the curriculum like? What do they do? Like, how does it work?
So it's a really great question. So, of course, the first step is for them to pick what area they want to go into. So if it's middle school ministry, high school ministry, spiritual formation, which is adult ministry for us, productions, another common one, and all of that. So they would get assigned to a specific, what we call a coach. And that's a full-time staff person, meets with them once a week, helps delegate their responsibilities of what they're doing. Now, I mean, there are some objective things, right? So they, the way that I always put it is like the first few months, they're basically doing stuff, you know, for their leader. And then they grow into the next stage is doing stuff with their leader and then kind of doing stuff as their leader as an extension. So it goes from for, with to kind of as. Some of the other objective stuff is every Thursday morning for 2 hours with the John Maxwell Leadership Center. They meet over there and they get like quality teaching both from pastoral staff here at 12 Stone. We bring outside leaders. I mean, they've had everything from Delta to Chick-fil-A. I mean, it's Atlanta. So everybody comes through here at one point, you know? And so it's like easy for getting high quality leaders of everything from, man, like high spiritual intensity to, biblical truth and stuff like that. But to other stuff like, you know, how to lead staff and time management and how to lead up, you know, some of those kind of things that, they're just brand new to them. And so how to deal in crisis, you know, what to deal when there's child abuse or when there's neglect and basic accounting stuff. So it's a whole 2-year rotating kind of process. And so that's every Thursday. That's a little bit more of the objective stuff. You know, I mean, our worship guys, a lot of them, they don't step on stage as a worship leader on the main stage until 6 months in. They kind of have to earn their voice a little bit. But we want to make sure that they learn to be servants first and care for the people around them. So yeah, that's kind of the stuff they get hands on. And as they, you know, it's just like any of the rest of us, right? Like you do your job well and you earn your voice a little bit more, you get more responsibility. And I mean, I love it. I love that phrase that says like leadership is like a puzzle. You solve that one and your reward is a next puzzle. And so that's kind of how it is, man. They just keep getting better and better and training them. And then, man, sometimes we hire them before their 2 years things, because it's like, man, this person could go take a campus, or this person could go be an elementary pastor here. And so, so that's kind of their week in, week out, man. They're seen as kind of pastoral staff. They do, we have a rotating thing called pastor on call, that, like, just like a lot of churches do, that if you will call up during the day, you have one pastor that day, and they do those kind of things. They do baptisms, and we teach them how to do weddings and all that, some of the very practical stuff. They have people critique them, how they speak, even if you're not like, hey, I'm called to be like a stage preacher, but we want to instill some basic, guidelines for them to be able to communicate, whether it's just even at a meeting or from a stage. They get to partner with like top-notch people. Our residents, it's even residents that aren't NextGen, they come into me and ask me questions that are more organizational or influential questions, which is great for us, man, because you get a look at from some of us, that are in the in the middle range of ministry, man. Like, it helps us stay kind of young and on our toes and learn from them as well. So I think overall it's a great win.
So the curriculum and like kind of the plan and the Thursday teaching sessions, all that, is that set and you just bring in people to teach it? Or is it kind of like, hey, is it different every time? Hey, let's do that. Let's get that person to do it.
So all of it's done online. So there are, if you went to churchresidencies.com, you would see there's probably about 20 something of our current residents that here at 12 Stone. But then there's a good amount of residents that are what we call partner churches. And we've got partner churches that are all over the country. I think there's probably about another 20 of those. And those are churches that have gone to us and said, hey, I want to partner up with 12 Stone, and for a very nominal fee, we send them the curriculum. We send them, just all the information that they need, the program structure, philosophy, some of our best practices, the training curriculum. We do regular coaching with their staff. I mean, one of the requirements is that there has to be an on-staff person there that leads that. And so we do coaching with them. And then once a year, we bring all the residents from all partner churches. We invite them to come to 12 Stone for a couple days for kind of teaching and development. And then we'll put them on our website for kind of like, here's some of our residents if you're looking for somebody to fill a spot.
Now, if a church wanted to partner with you, how does that work in terms of like, they pay you that nominal fee, but it's up to them how they do housing or if they pay their residents? I mean, does it work like that?
Well, it's actually a little bit more, there's a little bit more hurdles than that. It's not like anybody can do it. So there's an application. We take our partners pretty seriously. We want a background and make sure that they can do it. It's not a branding thing per se, but it's just more of a quality. Because if you say we're going to be part of our residency and be an extension, we want to make sure that you have both the facilities, the finance, the coaches to do that we align in philosophy and stuff like that. So it's an ongoing conversation of saying, hey, we want to do this. What we don't want to do is make the residency here be so great. And then when you have some partner churches where it's just a glorified internship, where other ones, they're really taking it seriously. And so there's some reviews and stuff. Tell us your plan. Let's work with you. And I think some of that's the coaching. And honestly, we've got some churches that have one, maybe two residents. That's it. But like they may be a smaller church plant, what have you, and we'll work with you, but they want to start from the beginning of saying, hey, when we start this, we want it to be high caliber, high capacity residents in this program. So there's an application. You go to churchresidency.com/partnership, and on there, there's a direct email to the people that lead that program. There's an application on there if you're interested in kind of filling out like, hey, I'm a little bit more interested. I take some next steps. And so it's not like, hey, you buy our product and that's it. It's an ongoing relationship, considering with coaching and all of that kind of stuff. So
if you do approve a church, do they have the freedom to pay whatever they want or do housing or not? Or is it basically they need to adopt your model where you offer housing for single residents?
No, I think what we would say is that we kind of give the what and the why behind it. Like, this is what the residency is about. Here's the heart around it. The contextualization of like, hey, man, you need to give your residents housing and stuff like that. The housing thing is always interesting because I think it's just one of those mental things. It's like, hey, I'm there and it seems temporary. Because we've got some residents that their families live here and they actually live in another house because they just want to feel like it's that, I'm 20, 21, 22, and I kind of want to just separate myself from my parents. Or we've got some other people that it's like, no, that works, So, I'm sure that there are different people that will, pay them and be able to do that. But we do, I think the purity part of it is this should be a residency. This shouldn't be just staff training, for generic everybody, because the goal is to train them and to send them. I mean, every resident that comes here, we're very clear on saying this is a 2-year deal. This isn't a 2-year residency that is automatically get you to 12 Stone. In fact, come into this realizing you're not going to work at 12 Stone because statistically it's not likely you will anyways. So I think this is like, we're super intentional and strategic about reaching a very small group of people and making them better.
That's good. So I know one of the challenges I see with like church internship programs or residency programs is somebody might kind of lead the charge for the program itself, but then inevitably, of course, they have other coaches or they're in other departments and your experience can differ by department. You know what I mean?
Sure,
because you could get a great leader who really helps you.
Absolutely.
Or they could just be so swamped you don't get any help at all. How do you like make that work or make it more consistent across 12?
Okay, so there's multiple things. So every coach, Paul Neiman is the director of our residency program. Really great guy, a former resident, former campus pastor here, and he leads the residency. So he has regular meetings with all the coaches, sometimes as a group, sometimes individually, to see how they're doing. He meets consistently with the residents to see how they're doing, and there's feedback to him. But there's a weekly like kind of woo-foo form that residents have to fill out and give information about what they're learning. Did their supervisor meet with them? So there's a lot of at 12 Stone, I think across the board, the two things that make us so healthy is feedback and collaboration. And so we have to have great feedback that's clear and helpful. That we don't want feedback that's whiny and muddy and all of that stuff that doesn't help anybody. But that consistent aspect of, man, there's a pressure on the coaches to be good coaches. But you're right. Sometimes there's one reason or another. Maybe they're just an unexperienced coach. Just because you're a staff person doesn't mean you automatically get a resident. You have to earn some of that and consistently show that you are. But it's sometimes we've had some coaches that hey, listen, for this season, I'm going to bow out because I'm maybe wearing 2 hats, or maybe I've got some other ministry stuff that I'm doing, or I've got some issue with my family or something like that, that for this season, I'm not going to be a great coach. And so, there's a lot of feedback and collaboration and working. And yes, sometimes we have a resident that comes and for one reason or another, that's as Christians, we're called to love each other, but sometimes we don't like each other. So there's that aspect.
That never happens.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So, it's it's like they say Jesus had 12 disciples and, one of them tried to kill him. So it's there's or get him killed, so it's in that aspect, you have the components of, man, we've switched some residents because maybe that venue didn't fit, or maybe their coach leaves, right? Because sometimes you have staff that take another ministry department and we want to get it to them. I'll tell you, Paul says this all the time as the residency director, and it's so wise. He says the residency is more about the resident than it is about the staff person. And so with that kind of mantra, if a resident isn't winning, we'll move them. And it's not just you get a notice on a Wednesday that your guy's going to leave tomorrow. It's done. There's definitely discussions before there's a decision on it, but there's a lot of collaboration and forethought. And hey, let's try this. Is it the employee? Is it the coach? Is it the resident? Is it the coach? Or maybe it's the campus they're in. Maybe they're not winning. Maybe they need somebody that can coach them in this area better. And then there's all kinds of stuff. It's not uncommon. I don't have a resident. for me, but like multiple times, Paul or another coach has asked me to go, hey, will you go spend some time with this resident, just check it, because there may be something that I bring to them as like the NextGen family pastor that they just hear it different. You know what I'm saying? We just hear things different from different people. And so there's a responsibility to all of us on staff to pour into these residents. And, they come to our staff meetings. They're part, like when I got to get all of NextGen together, I include the residents, and they're always very helpful and teachable. And when they're not, we go and have conversations and we try to figure that out.
What I think it might be helpful just to hear too, what is a specific example of a resident in NextGen, and like, what do they do? What responsibilities do they end up with? Is it hard to have somebody for kind of that 2 years or even a year and a half in, you're already looking for trying to help them get their next job? Does it ever feel like you get, cause I think a good residency, the resident probably gets 80% and the church gets 20%, or maybe it's 10-90 or something where the resident gets a lot of it, but the church gets something. How does that work out? What do they lead? How do they fill gaps in terms of staffing?
Yeah, that's a really, really great question. Well, and we're a lean model staff to begin with. So they do fill staff positions. They're 25 to 30 hours with us a week. Many of them have outside jobs, and we're fine with that. So when it comes to the real practical stuff, and of course every resident's a little bit different. But there are residents that will handle, say, for example, they'll be leading small groups for middle school, so they're kind of this spiritual formation, the person that under the guise of this middle school pastor, they're calling leaders and taking them to coffee and praying with them and checking up on them. So there's that side. There's some of the worship ones that, man, they own, 20 minutes of the programming, on our ministry environment nights, and they're picking the songs and they're recruiting the band members, and they're coaching those band members and loving on them and praying for them, taking care of spiritual intensity for their side. They're also, hey, I got to go tune some drums, or I got to go buy a guitar. And there's all processes through that, right? Our goal is that they own something, maybe not the first week, but 6 months in, you should feel like you're owning something. In family ministry, it's like, man, we've got some of them that are excellent writers in curriculum. They write really well. They can edit really well. They've got a good vernacular. That makes a lot of sense. And so they're reviewing, our curriculum as it comes in and as it goes out. They own something. There's some of our residents that quite early on, man, we may know that their supervisor is leaving, and it's a 3-month strategy of how do we move you into that position, right? We do trainings. We do monthly trainings in NextGen for them and connect them through, whether it's children or whether it's students. Whenever we have an event like our camp or our winter retreats, residents own stuff on it, and we want them. We clearly communicate what we want them to own, but they'll own it, and they'll take it and run with it. And if they're not, along the way, we teach them and give. But one of the wins for me is that, man, some of our students or some of our families just see them as another member of the pastoral staff, because they're winning from influence, not from job description. And that's a big win, right? That's in every area. So that's what we're kind of giving them, and it goes to ownership at the end of the day.
That's good. That's really good. That just trains them well. You know what I mean? Prepares them for ministry well. And I want to ask about that, like how churches could hire a resident. But before that, with the summer internship program, is that a set content plan too, and they get trained separately, or is it kind of like
yeah. So the summer internship, which honestly, man, if any of your listeners would want, they can email me and I'll send them everything I have in a zip file or whatever. It's a little bit different. So they meet with me on Mondays from 9 to 11, and I always bring in 2 people that do like TED Talks things. They speak for 20 minutes and there's 10 minutes of Q&A. And for them, they do, it's every department comes in. So I get missions, I get accounting, I get HR, I get children's ministry, whether they're in that or not. It's the only time that all like 12 summer interns are together. And the purpose of that is twofold. I think part of it is for a lot of young men and women definitely feel like, well, if I'm going to be a pastor, if I'm working at a church, I'm going to either be the senior pastor, right? Or a student pastor if I'm a guy, or a lot of our young ladies come in and feel like, oh, I can only be a children's pastor. I'm like, wait, there's so many other opportunities out there. And so we bring them and say, hey, here's somebody from our accounting who loves Jesus, loves the local church, serves in student ministry, but also is a CPA. And that's ministry, or people that do things in communications or marketing or HR. Our HR lady, Barb, is awesome, loves Jesus, loves people, but she's got a set of skills and she feels like being in the local church is where God's called her to be. Awesome. And so they get experience of that, and it helps expand their horizons of saying like, well, wait, I don't have to like pick, do I want to be an accountant or do I want to be a middle school pastor? Okay, that's a bad analogy. You never see people like, those are two different types of left-brain people. But
that's right.
But there is that concept of, how do I balance that? And so for that, they do that. They get most, our summer interns will go through 2 books. We have one book if you kind of feel like, it depends on where you're at. If you're probably 80% of your call, confident, we've got some other books that we'll go through. But if you're still on the front end of like, man, am I supposed to be doing this? We've got some other books that we go through. So they'll do 2 books. They're supposed to interview at least 15 staff in those 8 weeks. They'll go see at least 2 things on every one of our campuses, whether it's how we do children's ministry, some of that's context to see those things, but some of it's experience. I mean, Nick, I've had so many people who have their only experience has been a little bit in children's and students, and they've just never seen how creative arts does what they do, or they've never been part of counseling ministry and see what they do, or missions or whatever. And I'm like, it's to expose them that there's so many great areas of ministry that aren't front stage, right? Like there's a lot of great ministries that you don't have to be the main person on stage. And I think that relieves a lot of pressure. It educates them and it helps us at the same time. I'm always about tier level because now I have staff people that have never had, an intern or a resident, and now they can pour into them, like our marketing people don't have intern, but like now they've got some of them they're going to spend an hour with them doing a presentation, answering questions, all that stuff. But they're also going to get some of these people coming in interviewing them, and it allows them to share what they're excited about, validates all of that. And it's awesome, man. I mean, it's a win-win along the way. And the last part of it is every summer intern is partnered with a resident. And for me, man, it's a simple logistics thing. I'm a 40-year-old guy, and I want them to get some wisdom from me. Their site supervisor's probably going to be late 20s, 30s, but I want somebody to be like, dude, I was just like you 2 years ago. Yeah. And a 24-year-old can speak to a 21-year-old in a way that I can't, So like it helps some of these residents. Some of them are assigned an intern to just navigate and maybe it's just meet once a week for coffee. Maybe if they're in their second year of residency, maybe that student pastor says, hey, I want you to be with that, I want you to be with that resident. So does that make sense?
It does. That's a great program. And I know some people listening are probably thinking, well, it works well in your church because it's so large. So you can put them with these different people and experience these different departments. But, that's not – you could definitely start somewhere, right? Your church doesn't have to be as large as yours to have a great residency.
No, but no, I think it's in a smaller church, there's sometimes it'd be even easier, like, cause we've got some great, some great volunteers and stuff. Yeah. There's a lot of ways to contextualize it and kind of make it your own and not put a lot of pressure on one person. Like, and honestly, like we've got our applications and all of our information and stuff that we learned. So right now it's pretty turnkey. I mean, just from an operations side, it probably over between January till when it starts in June, between myself and my admin, it's probably maybe 40 hours worth of work. And I mean, most of that's interviews, I nailed it down to 30 minutes. I've got a few questions, reputation precedes everything else, especially if they're recommended by another staff person. So it's not like once you get it rolling, it's awesome. Our executive pastor, Dan Ryland, takes all the interns to lunch one time during the summer, which is my highlight because they get to ask this, like the pastor's coach about leadership questions, and he gets to spend time with them. So it's great to kind of bridge gaps even within your church where, of generational gaps sometimes, and, so it's awesome, man. I love the internship. I love the way that it's become a feeder to the residency as well for our resident staff to be able to sit there and say, okay, this person didn't do too well with 8 weeks for us. They're not going to do too well for 2 years,
Yeah.
So when you kind of have that and it's let's be honest, man, like you can do great in the summer internship, but if you do average or even poor, it's not the end of the world. It's 8 weeks. You know what I'm saying? Like, as long as they're, not doing anything illegal or immoral. I'd be lying to you if I told you the 50 summer interns we had that all of them did fantastic, But then again, man, a lot of the people that I went to school with in ministry, sometimes like they're, I second guess myself. There's a few years I second guess myself, So like,
yeah, 100% aren't going to turn out even from seminary, much less an 8-week internship.
Yeah.
So I know some people might be thinking, hey, we need to hire for this position. Maybe we should consider hiring a resident. What does that look like?
So they go on there, and if you look, you can go on to churchresidency.com and then go to their resident page, and you can click on it. And each of them is similar to like a LinkedIn stuff. It shows when they graduate. Most of our residents start in June, so it's a cycle. But it talks about where they were at, what their focus is, some of their skill sets, their education. All of them have teaching videos on it, a little blurb about it you can download, or you can content a picture directly. So it's almost like an online resume. And we create these for them with the intention of if you were looking to hire a resident, come on here, look at where they're at, look at their focus. You can search by, do I need a children's? Do I need a student? You can watch a video of their teaching to see what what they're presenting from the stage. And then feel free to call them, call me, I get emails all the time. They're like, hey, Monahan, you got any people that are, great next gen leaders that are, graduating in the next, the next 6 months? I can tell you this right now, no. So, cause there's a few we want to keep for ourselves, but at the same time, man, we want what's God's best for them. There's some of them that come from all over the place and they go back because the church that they grew up in and they just love and they just want a different experience. Right. And so that's what it is. So yeah, you can go on there and there's like, the individual videos and there's a little like, form that you can put your name and information and that person will get, a direct email from you and you can just start having conversations. I always suggest that you contact myself or Paul Neiman, the director of the residency, just to kind of get some of the backstory and where they're at and if there's something going on. And, so, just like any other website, it's updated as much as possible, but, a week or two can change for a lot of these young people. So, and it's not just the residents for us that are at 12 Stone. There's residents, that are all across the country. And so, I know like there's friends of mine that are like, dude, I'm in California and I need somebody who understands kind of that, West Coast kind of stuff. And so, yeah, man, there's some really, really great stuff. So jump on there, man, have a conversation with some of them. And at the same time, man, if you guys know people that you would feel like, man, this would be really great for some of my, late college students to be interested in, man, we'd love to hear from you.
Definitely. Well, it's a great program. It's one of the best that's out there. So congratulations to you guys. You've done an awesome job.
Yeah.
How can people connect with you if they have any questions, beyond going to churchresidency.com?
Yeah. So I think the best thing for me is you can email me. It's kevin.monahan@12stone.com. You can always reach out to me on Twitter. It's @KevinMonahan. Those are probably the two best ways, man. My heart is for the local church and for all of this. So if there's questions or resources, 12 Stone also has a resource page. So resources.12stone.com, where we got thousands of just documents and sermon series and information about the internships and residencies and all that stuff. And it's all free for people to download. So that's resources.12stone.com. That's another great place to grab some of that stuff. But yeah, man, I mean, don't be afraid to reach out to myself or Paul Neiman, who leads the residency. We'd love to help where we can.
Awesome, Kevin. Well, I really appreciate you coming back on the podcast, sharing this program.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man. Yeah.
How it works. I think a lot of churches need to do something, internship, residency, something to help bridge that gap and train people, kind of like you said, after high school, as they're figuring out what to do. We have a program for each, even one of ours is church planting specific, but and our best church planners as of late are ones that do residencies. And there's great ones who didn't do a residency, but actually most of them that I look at had done a residency, and it's just so helpful. So thanks for doing what you do. And
man,
for sharing
my
it with
pleasure,
us.
Man. Nick, thanks for doing what you do, and I appreciate all this stuff, and it's great, man. Thanks for having me.
You bet. Thanks, Kevin. 12 Stone is such a gift to the church, and Kevin is as well. In fact, you wouldn't even know, talking with Kevin, he's so humble. You would have no idea that he has multiple master's degrees. He has a PhD, just a brilliant guy, great friend. Kevin and I get to talk all the time about what's going on in each other's lives, but also what's going on in ministry there. And he has such a servant's heart. And I'm thankful for his friendship and for his wisdom. And this residency program, the internship program they have, it's very much like the rest of their church. It's open-handed. It's designed to help people, help residents and interns that jump in the program, but it's also designed to help churches. So coming out of there, here are a couple action items I thought of. First is obvious. Make sure you go to churchresidency.com. Read about the program. Maybe you have an internship or a residency program. Maybe you don't. Either way, I would look into that. Consider partnering with them. Another action item is to just have a discussion about whether or not you should have an internship or residency program if you don't, or if you should change it if you have one in place. Something else he mentioned that I think could just be useful in any setting is that idea of using the framework that when somebody new is with you, in their case an intern or a resident, that you're going to support me, for this season, then you're going to work with me, kind of work alongside each other. Then you're going to kind of be on your own leading some things, and we'll meet and talk about that. But just that 3-stage model, support, work with, and then lead on your own, I think is really helpful. You could even use that as part of your onboarding with volunteers or part of your training plan when somebody's going from like a volunteer to a leader, and now they're leading other volunteers. You could follow that model. You can get the links in the show notes at nickblevins.com/episode 94. I hope that was helpful for you. Even if you're not doing residencies or internships, I think some of the principles there apply to just leading volunteers and helping develop them and figure out if full-time vocational ministry is in their future. I think that's really helpful. But if you're looking into do a residency or an internship program, or you have one, you want to tweak it, definitely check that out. I think that'll be really helpful. Thanks for listening. As usual, just appreciate your emails, the ratings and reviews you leave on iTunes, for sharing it on social media, all of that. I really appreciate that. Thank you. I hope it's helpful to you, and I look forward to these interviews that I get to do, and I hope they're as helpful to you as they are to me. That's kind of my guide. As I ask the questions I feel like I want to know, and I try to seek out the conversations that I think will be helpful to me, and I hope they're helpful to you as well. So thanks for listening, and I'll catch you in the next episode of the Family Ministry Podcast.
Thanks for listening to the Nick Blevins Family Ministry Podcast. We hope this helps you maximize your church's potential. We would love to hear stories of how you apply what you've learned. You can do that by leaving a comment on iTunes or in the show notes at nickblevins.com.